Hi folks, HR Funk here. Over the course of the last decade or so, we've seen a great deal of advancement in all things related to firearms. Some real advancement, some imagined or maybe exaggerated. But one area where I think we've seen a lot of real advancement is in the arena of optics. Not all that long ago, to get anything resembling decent performance from an optic, you had to spend almost as much on that optic as the firearm was mounted to. In fact, in some cases, you might have spent more on the optic than you did on the firearm. But in recent years, we've seen a great deal of improvement in what we would once have called budget optics. And I'm always intrigued when I'm contacted by an optics company and asked to test one of their products, and it falls into that budget optic category. I think we can all agree if we're spending a lot of money on an optic, we expect very good performance. But when we have a more budget-friendly item, then you kind of wonder what you're going to get for your money. And that is the case with today's video, or the subject of today's video. I was recently contacted by Vector Optics and asked if I wanted to test one of their products, and I said, sure. So they sent me one of their Maverick 2 Plus red dot optics, and in this video we're going to be taking a close-up look at that optic. I'll tell you about its features and functions, and we'll head out to the range and see how it performs. So here we go. Here's our first up-close look at the Vector Optics Maverick 2 Plus. In general terms, this is a non-magnifying optic with a 22mm objective lens. The lenses are all fully multi-coated for light transmission and image clarity. Also, internally, this optic is nitrogen purged to prevent any sort of fogging or condensation inside of the lenses. The Maverick 2 operates on a single CR2032 battery stored in this battery compartment, and oddly, the Maverick 2 did not arrive with a battery in the packaging. This is the first optic I've received in a long time that did not come with a battery. Fortunately, I had a 2032 laying around that I was able to install in the optic, so all is well. But just keep that in mind, you are going to have a battery, unless someone just forgot to put a battery in with the one that I received, but it did not come with one. The items that did come with the Maverick 2 Plus are shown here. That includes a wrench for adjusting the mount, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, a lens cloth, a low profile mount that you could use with a 1913 rail, and also an owner's manual. And something to be aware of with the owner's manual, actually a couple of things. First off, I see this a lot these days. The print is very small and kind of difficult to read. Fortunately, you can look at this online and you can actually make it larger on your computer screen to be able to read it a little bit easier. The other thing about the manual is there are several different versions of the Maverick optic that are available. This one specifically is the Maverick 2 Plus 1x22 DBR, and it has a product code of SCRD. I'll turn this around so you can see it. Hopefully you can read that right there. SCRD-PD12. So that's specifically the optic that I have here, but the owner's manual is for all the Maverick line as best I can tell. So some of the information in the manual does apply to this optic. Some of it applies to other optics in this same line. So keep that in mind. And if you're looking at ordering one, make sure you order one with the features that you want and you don't get one that you didn't want. Also, as you can see here, the Maverick 2 Plus comes with a pair of plastic flip-up lens covers. Also from this angle, you can see the control buttons right here, the plus and minus button. If you push either one of those, that will turn the optic on. If you press and hold the minus button for, I believe, more than 3 seconds, that turns it off. These buttons are also used to change the reticle. And something I've not mentioned yet is the reason this is called the DBR is because it has a double reticle. You have two different reticle selections with this optic. I'll show you momentarily. One is a 3-minute of angle dot. The other is a 30-minute of angle circle surrounding a 2-minute of angle dot. So you can use either one of those that you prefer when you're shooting. Depending upon what type of shooting you're doing, one of those might work better than the other. I also want to point out the cantilever mount that comes with the Maverick 2 Plus, and also this quick release latch. And this is something I like because I switch optics from firearms to firearms so many times. When I get a quick release, I like that. When we get to the range, once I have this zeroed, I'm going to check to see how well it holds zero when I remove it and then reattach it. But just so you know how it works, there is a locking mechanism right here that has to be pulled to the rear in order to release the latch, and then the optic can be raised right off the rail and then put back on. The latch is moved back into place, and as long as that lock is not pulled to the rear, it's not going to open up. There is an adjustment on this side of the mount that you can use to make this tighter or looser just by turning that small nut, either to tighten it or loosen it. So if you put this on to begin with and it feels like it's moving around more than you want it to, you can tighten up that nut a little bit. And it takes a little bit of trial and error, but once you get it where you want it, that stays very secure. So I like that a lot. If you don't like this, there is that other 1913 mount that I showed you that comes along. Obviously that is a lower mount. This one is intended to give you a lower 1/3 co-witness with iron sights, whereas the other one would not do that. It would be too low to give you that. Another design feature I like with this optic can be seen right here, and that is finger adjustable elevation and windage turrets. Now some folks don't like this because they're going to be concerned that these things can be inadvertently contacted and change your optic setting, which I understand, but if you look at the way this is made, the body of the optic actually comes up and helps to protect both your elevation and windage setting. Now it's probably still possible that something could brush against there, although I'm brushing my thumb pretty forcefully and now my index finger, and that's not moving. So these things are pretty sturdy, and they are, I don't know if you can hear that, they are audible and tactile, so you can feel those clicks. They're graduated in 1 minute of angle increments. So I like this. It seems like a lot of optics manufacturers have some sort of proprietary tool that you have to use to adjust the elevation and windage, and no two manufacturers seem to use the exact same tool. And of course, nobody uses a plain old screwdriver or anything like that. So when I have something where at the range I can quickly make any adjustments I need to and then set it and forget it, it makes me happy. Something I would like to see added to the turrets is a witness mark, so you could line up the setting that you have with a witness mark, and then just at a glance you would know whether or not there had been any movement of your turrets. And it surprises me that that's not on there, because we can see that there are markings on each of the little dials for the windage and elevation, but there is no corresponding index mark on the body itself, so we know when our setting is properly lined up with whatever place we are putting it for proper zero. I suppose if you just happen to remember that there's a, what is that, 32 that's visible here and whatever the number is down here, you would more or less be able to do that, but having a nice mark there would be a little bit better. You could always mark this yourself with something, and that way you would know for sure that the dials had not moved at all. The Maverick 2 Plus has a total of 60 minutes of angle for both windage and elevation adjustment. It does not state this directly in the manual or on the website, but I assume that is 30 minutes of angle up and 30 minutes of angle down and 30 minutes of angle left and 30 minutes of angle right from mechanical center. On we go to the reticle of the Maverick 2 Plus, and I'm having my customary difficulty in trying to get you an image of the reticle, but I think I have everything set to where you can at least get an idea of what it looks like. And I'm going to start out with the circle dot reticle. Again, this is a 30 minute of angle circle around a 2 minute of angle dot. There are 9 brightness settings. Currently I have it all the way down on the lowest setting, which is why you don't see the reticle. The first setting is a night vision brightness, and after that everything is for daylight use, and I'm just going to work my way up through the brightness. Again, as you can see, this is the circle dot. And I think I'm all the way to the highest brightness level. So I'll work my way back down a little bit to hopefully make this a little clearer for you to be able to see. That looks pretty good right there, or at least it does as best I can tell. To change from reticle to reticle, you simply press and hold the plus button for more than 3 seconds, and that has now switched over to the 3-minute of angle dot. The same exact procedure is used to change it back. When you're actually looking through the optic, the reticle that you see here looks bigger. It looks tiny as I see it here in the camera, but it does look bigger and very much clearer when I'm looking through the Maverick 2 Plus itself. Here I switch back over to the 3-minute of angle dot so that I can tell you that there is unlimited eye relief for the Maverick 2 Plus, so that's not a concern. Also, to assist with battery life, there is shake awake technology. If the sight senses no movement for 30 minutes, it powers down, and then as soon as it senses movement, it turns itself back on. The Maverick 2 Plus is rated as being shockproof. It also has a waterproof rating of IPX4, which I find kind of underwhelming. That basically means if water is splashed on it, that shouldn't cause any problem. But in heavy rain or partial submersion or anything like that, there could be an issue because it's not rated for that. That bothers me just a little bit. I really like my optic to be able to survive anything that I can survive or that the firearm survives. Now, if somebody throws me in the middle of the ocean and I have to swim in from miles offshore, I probably won't survive that. So I would not expect my optic to survive that. But if somebody sprays me with water, or I get caught in a downpour, or maybe I fall into a swimming pool or something like that, I would expect to survive that, so I would expect my optic to survive that. So I would like to see the waterproofing rating improve for this optic. I also don't know what exactly shockproof means. Once again, if somebody throws me off a 4th floor balcony and I land on concrete, I wouldn't necessarily expect to survive that. But if I fall on the range, or if my rifle accidentally drops off a bench or something like that, I would expect the optic and the rifle, and me for that matter, to survive that type of an experience. So we'll test that a little bit when we get to the range. I'm not going to do anything too drastic because, as I said, I would not expect the optic to survive anything that I wouldn't also survive. There is a 5-year manufacturer's warranty for the Vector Optics Maverick 2 Plus, so if you would have a problem with it, you can contact them and they will repair or replace it, so long as there's not something that was done to it that was unauthorized or any sort of abuse or anything like that. Folks, after I finished recording the portion of the video you've seen so far, I started to pack up and get ready to come out here to the range, and I walked outside and noticed that there was a storm brewing. In fact, it looked like it was going to start storming at any point. So I thought, rather than come to the range and get myself soaked, this was a good time to test out this IPX4 waterproof rating for the Maverick 2. So I set it out on my back porch, and a few minutes later, the clouds opened up and we had one of those summertime downpours that lasts for about 20 minutes, and I had this optic sitting outside in that the entire time. Once it finished, I checked and made sure that the optic was still working. In fact, it didn't seem to phase it at all, but I had to wait for a while until things dried off enough that I could come out to record this part of the video. So I did what anyone would do, and I threw this thing into the freezer for about 2 hours. So it sat there for 2 hours. I pulled it out, looked through it. Again, it was still working just fine. I drove out here to the range and mounted it back on the rifle. At this point, it's been out of the freezer for, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. And there's still water that I can see on the lenses and also on the body of the optic from the rain, but otherwise it doesn't look like anything's phased it. I am going to wipe off the lenses because they have water and what looked like a little bit of fogging on the exterior of the lenses, and I'm not surprised by that considering that it just came out of the freezer. And looking through here, the optic is still working. I'm going to try to get you a look at this. Let me make it a little bit brighter so that hopefully it's going to show up. And I'll let all of you verify that we do still have a working optic. Okay, it does not look like a blob when I look through here. I can actually see that circle dot reticle, but this is just to verify that after sitting out in the rain for about 20 minutes and a pretty good downpour, and then right after that going into the freezer for about 2 hours, the Maverick 2 is still working. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and zero the optic, and then we'll continue the test from there. Okay folks, I just finished zeroing the Maverick 2 at 50 yards, and I was a little bit worried because I started out my first shot I fired at 25 yards, And the windage wasn't bad. It was about 7 or 8 minutes of angle right, but the elevation was very high at 25 yards. It was about 70 or 75 minutes of angle high. And I thought, boy, I hope this thing has enough adjustment that I can bring it down. And it did. So now, as I said, I have it zeroed at 50 yards. And I'm going to use a distance of 50 yards for this test, since this is a non-magnified optic, because I want to make sure that the shots, or the target maybe I should say, is close enough that I can be pretty sure of where my shots are going, as opposed to 100 yards where with the 3 minute of angle dot, it could start to get a little bit of iffy as far as my shooting is concerned. So in any case, the first thing I'm going to do is a 3-shot confirmation group of my zero on camera at 50 yards. Let's see how it goes. There's 3 rounds downrange. Let's go take a look at the target. The zero at 50 yards is looking pretty good. Essentially, I want to keep the shots inside of this center chest gray square here. So I'm using this as an aiming point, and we'll be able to gauge as we go through the rest of the test if we see this zero start to wander or if it stays pretty much right there. The first test is going to be something that I mentioned back at the shop. I want to dismount the optic by releasing this quick release mount and then remount it and see if it's going to hold zero, or at least be reasonably close to holding zero. I'm not expecting it to be absolutely perfect, but if it at least keeps shots in that large gray box that we just talked about a moment ago, then I think that's going to be pretty good for an optic in this price range. So here we go. The optic is dismounted. And now it is remounted. Rifle's loaded. Let's see where these shots go. Everything looks pretty good on this end. Let's go down range and see where they hit. You can call me impressed on this one, folks. Those shots are staying right with those first 3 that I fired. We've got one of them that went a little bit farther to the right, but I've got these shots that are tending to go to the right a little bit anyway, and this shot basically is right in with those, obviously well inside this gray center chest area. So let's move on to the next test. Things are looking good to this point. Next, I want to see if there's going to be any zero shift when I change between reticles. To this point, I've been using the 3 minute of angle dot. I'm going to switch over to the circle dot with the 30 minute of angle circle and the 2 minute of angle dot. And I'm going to load up 3 rounds. So let's see what happens. And there's 3 more rounds downrange. Let's go see where those landed. No shift whatsoever when I change reticles. Those shots are all staying right there. I had these 2 that wandered over. These are now looking like the deviation, and this is looking like the group here. If I hadn't already established the zero and started the test, I would probably go another 2 minutes of angle left to bring this group over here. But again, that's easily staying inside that center chest area. The shots are all staying together, so I'm not going to make any changes at all. Okay, folks, time for the next test, and the rifle is completely unloaded, so it is safe. And I'm going to try a couple of drop tests. First, I'm just going to start the rifle here as though it was leaning against something and it fell over and landed right on the optic. Next, we'll try something a little bit more vigorous, as though you were holding it or was on a table or something and it fell. And that didn't land on the optic, that landed on the rifle. So let me try it again. That was right on the optic. I'm going to try it on both sides. All right, let's see if it held zero. So here we go, 3 more shots at 50 yards. And I am going to go back to the 3-minute of angle dot. And let's see if the Maverick 2 held 0. Shift. Time to go back down range. Are you impressed yet? Because I am. Once again, those shots are staying right there and nothing is wandering anywhere else on the target. Only one test left, folks. Let's see if it survives the last one. Folks, I've dismounted the Maverick 2 from my rifle because I am just not going to subject my rifle to this. But I'm going to do 3 drops on concrete. Let's go from a height of 6 feet. There's 1. Let's go on each side if I can get it to fall like that. There's 3. Now I'll remount it and we'll see what happens. To make sure I get it back in the same rail slot. And I need to grab a little bit more ammunition. Folks, I paused the video long enough just to get some more ammunition, and I have remounted the optic. I don't know if the camera was turned this way enough for you to see me doing that, but I haven't done anything else. So let's see, after this test, if we see any shift in point of impact. There's 3 down range. Let's go see where they hit. So not only was there a point of impact shift, there was a big point of impact shift. I had to play back the video to see where the first shot went, and I believe this is it right here. So we had about a 1 foot shift to the right. The elevation stayed pretty consistent, but our point of aim really is way off there. Let me go back and re-zero the optic, and we'll see if it's going to hold 0 now once I readjust it, or if we're going to continue to see it wander. At this point, I've reestablished my 50-yard 0, and the windage and elevation adjustments still seem to be functioning properly. It took 2 shots to re-zero the optic. So what I'm going to do is fire a 5-shot group at 50 yards. I'm going to be again aiming at the center chest of the target. I don't necessarily expect these shots to go exactly to the same point of impact as the shots that I fired previously, but I really am looking to see if I'm going to have a group at 50 yards or if the shots are going to start wandering all over the place, indicating that there is some problem inside of the optic. So here we go with 5 shots at 50 yards. Let's find out. Let's go down range and see where they hit. Looked like 3 out of those 5 shots are right back here. I had a couple of them over here. They're all still basically staying on this black square, and this thing is 3 inches by 3 inches. I think with what that optic's been through, to still be able to put shots that accurately on target from 50 yards is pretty darn good. So I'm going to say yes, it is once again holding 0. So a few thoughts here at the end of the video, folks. First off, is the Vector Optics Maverick 2 going to last as long as a much more expensive military grade optic? I have no idea. Is it capable of withstanding all the abuse of a much more expensive military grade optic? Probably not, based on what we've seen so far. But Up until the point that the testing got pretty extreme, this thing was doing great. It withstood being out in the rain, which is something that could very foreseeably happen. I know I've been out on the range more than one time. I've been out hunting more than one time. I've been just out and about more than one time and gotten caught in a downpour and had my equipment, firearms, optics, what have you, get soaked. And that didn't seem to bother the Maverick 2 at all. Also, with regard to the mount, removing it, remounting it, changing from one reticle to the other, none of that had any effect on it whatsoever. Freezing it didn't seem to bother it. It worked right through that. What I would call normal bumps and bruises, drops on the ground, didn't bother it. It wasn't until I dismounted it and started dropping it on the concrete that we saw that pretty major shift in point of impact. And the elevation was still good, but the deviation was then in windage. And as we saw, it was about a foot. But once I corrected that, it was once again doing a good job holding zero. So I think there are a couple of lessons here. First off, if you drop your firearm or it's subjected to some extreme mishap or handling problem or what have you, get it out to the range and check it and make sure your sights are still on. If not, obviously make a sight correction so they are back on. Secondly, $129 optic, folks. And it went through all this. By the way, check the information section of this video for a discount code from Vector Optics. If you're interested in this, you'll save yourself a few more bucks. But all in all, I don't think it did too bad. I've had some other budget optics that I think have done a little bit better, but it held up pretty well, I would say. The overall accuracy that I was getting, when we take the abuse aside, was pretty decent. So again, for a relatively inexpensive optic, and as I said all the way back at the beginning of the video, we used to have to pay a lot more to get an optic that was capable of doing what this one just did. So all in all, I think that's pretty good. In any case, that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, there's a discount code for that. Same thing for House of Pain. It's all in the info section of this video. And don't forget Targets Online if they have anything that's going to meet your target needs. In any case, that's going to do it for now. See you next time. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.